Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to the May 13th Oklahoma City Planning Commission meeting and ask if you have pagers or cell phones, if you would turn those off or silence them now, we would appreciate that. If you are not the applicant and you're here to talk to us about a case, there are sign-up sheets like this. They're on the table outside the chambers. If you would complete one and give it to our secretary, we would be happy to hear you when that case comes up. And we're ready to go with minutes of the April 22nd meeting.
Move approval of minutes.
We have a motion and a second to approve the April 22nd minutes. Cast your votes and see if we have the lights correct. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're good to go. Thank you. And continuance requests, Russell?
We have 4 uncontested requests for continuance. These are items 23, 24, 25, and 26. Item 23 is to continue until June the 24th. Items 24 through 26 request to continue to June the 10th.
Edwin Killebrew, the item that you've come down for is scheduled to be continued to June 26th, is that right? 24th?
June 10th.
June 10th, I'm sorry. So it will not be heard today? You may address us if you'd like to do that. Come to the microphone and give us your name and address. We'll do our best to remember what you have to say today if you can't be back here on June 10th.
I plan on coming back, but
okay.
I do want you to know that I am here. My name is Edwin Killebrew. I live at 11220 Robinwood Lane, which is north of the proposed rezoning application that I'm here today to register protest. I filed a letter last week at the Planning Commission submitting my comments about that proposed change, and just remind the Planning Commission of my presence here today to contest that application to even be continued, much less be rezoned, and ask that you do pay close attention to my comments in the letter, and I'll return next month.
We will do that, and we thank you for coming down and apologize for the inconvenience.
Thank you.
Anyone else to talk to us about cases 23, 24, 25, or 26 on our agenda?
Move the uncontested continuances.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the continuances. Cast your votes, and those are approved. Additional requests?
We have 2 new requests for continuance. Item 4, which is PUD 1415, a request to defer until May the 27th. And item 16, which is C 6210, a request to defer until May the 27th.
Is there anyone who came to talk to us about items 4 or 16 on our agenda today?
Move continuances of 4 and 16.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to continue items 4 and 16. Cast your votes. It's approved. Are there any other continuance requests from the public? Hearing none, we'll go to consent docket.
We have 2 items on the consent docket. Item 1 is SM 067, which is to consider a resolution changing the name of Northwest 112th Street to Northwest 112th Terrace. And item 2 is PC 10253, an application by Larry Toombs to rezone 3512 Northeast 141st Street from AA Agricultural to R1 Single Family in Ward 7.
Is there anyone who wanted to talk to us about items 1 or 2?
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket. Cast your votes, and that is approved.
Item 3 is SPUD 560, which is an application by Michael McCoy to rezone 319 Northwest 23rd Street from R4 General Residential with an HL, a UCD overlay, and C4 General Office UD, TT 23rd Street, Uptown Overlay District, to SPUD 560 in Ward 2.
And is the applicant here? Come to the microphone, please. And if you'd give us your name and address for the record.
My name is Michael McCoy. The address is 1020 South Westminster, Midwest City.
Okay. Commissioners, no one has signed up.
I'll move approval.
Second.
I've got some questions,
Oh, sorry.
just a couple. Do you agree with the TEs in the staff report?
Yes, I noticed there was a couple of ambiguities between a couple of the items, but I've been assured that their understanding is the same as my understanding.
You have assurance from the staff?
Yes.
And the other question about the signage, it said in this, in the staff report, per UD ordinance. What is that? What signage is per UD ordinance?
It's my understanding there's limitations of types and heights.
But
I think it's outlined in that document also in their comments. I think there was a limitation in height, 10 to 12 feet, monument signs only.
okay, then that TE, whatever per UD ordinance is, that TE supersedes that statement in your site application. Okay, all right, good. That's just. I had another comment, but I won't make it.
Okay. Well, we have a motion and a second to approve item 3. Cast your votes, and that is approved.
Item 4 has been continued to May the 27th. Item 5 is SPUD 535, an application by Crow, Oklahoma, number 9,
Dennis, we have your letter across the board.
to rezone 4132 Will Rogers Parkway from I-2 Scenic River Overlay to SPUD 535 in Ward 3.
Mr. Chairman, Dennis Fox, and standing next to me is Mr. Ed Brown, and we would like to talk to you about this item first, and then the other item is outlined and is shown over on the edge of the map, and if I could, just for a minute, point that out. First item we're dealing with is an existing warehouse. The second item deals with 2 vacant tracts. This is the Meridian Business Park. It was actually first developed by Mr. Brown's father and Trammell Crow back in the 60s and 70s. It is, I'm going to say, probably 98% developed, very few vacant lots. But one of the problems we ran into is when we started looking at not only the existing facility but also the 2 vacant tracts, the Scenic River ordinance took a line that had a huge impact on these properties, and that line is right down the middle of this street. So on the north side, the zoning remains industrial, and then on the south side, it was turned into the scenic overlay ordinances. The problem with that is it strips out industrial. From our standpoint, and for those of you all that have been here, this is a very nice industrial park, very well maintained. Covenants have been in place for a long time. The staff was nice enough to work with us and come up with guidelines in regard to how we could solve the problem. Problem being twofold. One, if we had a tornado like we had the other day and the building was wiped out, then we'd have a situation where the value and ability to use the property would be taken away. Second problem was on the next case, which deals with 2 vacant lots. The solution we came up with was to do 2 spuds. Those spuds mirror each other in regard to the regulations. Planning staff has spent a long time working on development regulations and that will fit these properties. The interesting thing about this property is Ed was telling me that the property to the south that you see between the river and the area that we're asking to be zoned, the city came to Mr. Brown's dad and Trammell Crow and asked that that be donated as part of the String of Pearls. So it was. String of Pearls, we know, didn't take place, but the good news is river development, I think, will take place in the future, and so the city actually owns the property between our property and the river. So we do not own that property, and I think that's an important consideration. Cities got their property and can preserve it and develop it in any way they want to. The memorandum that you all have that was passed out to you deals with the technical evaluations, and two things have taken place. There was a time where when the code was modified a year or so ago, that there was some confusion about I-3 uses and I-2 uses, and some of them were filled in the I-2 code. That's been rectified and resolved. But in addition, the staff felt that there were some uses that they would like for us to exclude, and what the memorandum does is show you the uses that we've agreed to. The uses that we need to leave in, if you have specific questions, Mr. Brown can answer them. We feel like those are uses that are compatible with what's existing out in the area, and the other TEs, we're here to answer any questions if you have any.
Dennis, let's start with the TEs, because I guess I'm a little bit confused. Let's start with TE number 2.
Okay.
Tell me what it is you want to change about TE number 2 by your suggested language.
Okay. When you look at the language on the on TE number 2 after public streets in your staff report, and it deals with the scenic overlay district and no closer than 50 feet, the problem is the city owns that property just to the south of our property line. So we're agreeing to screening, and so what we felt was appropriate was, well, if we put dumpsters in, which you will have dumpsters, we'll screen them. And so the 50 feet didn't make a lot of sense, and in coordination with planning
The
staff.
50 feet was the real issue and not whether it's visible from the overlay district?
Yes, and that was the real issue, the 50 feet, and that's why on the TEs we agreed to the first sentence and just stop it at streets, and that way the dumpsters will be screened and we don't have a problem with that. It was just the location, the 50 feet, that ran into a problem.
Okay, well, I guess my question is, will I see it from the city's property?
We'll have to provide site-proof screening.
But that could be, what, a chain link fence? Or
No, on the dumpsters, site-proof screening would be wooden fence, might be masonry around it, but
Okay, well, when you
could not
said-
see through.
When you said that screening, I thought you meant along the property line and not the dumpster. Okay.
Okay.
Number 4, then,
Number 3 and 4 were okay. 5 and 6 were okay. On 4, we just added
3-inch caliper trees?
Yeah,
Is that-
3-inch caliper trees. So,
Okay.
On what centers?
that I'm not sure of. I'm not sure what the staff.
There wasn't anything.
Yeah, I think it's, JJ, is that in the code on street trees, what the separation is? Whatever the code provides, we'll live with it. If it's not clear in the code, then whatever you all want to come up with is fine with us. We will provide landscape.
JJ?
On street trees, usually you want at least like a 50-foot separation, because you won't get them too close together, they're going to grow together at the top and not do well. Street trees are large trees that provide a canopy. So I think 50 would...
How wide is your property line? I mean, what's the width of the first one we're talking about?
No more than 350 feet of frontage.
On frontage, on the first parcel, the one to the west.
First off, I'm Ed Brown. I'm one of the partners with Crow Oklahoma number 9. on the...
Oh, I see. It's on the map, 300 and some feet. You know.
Yeah.
So 50-foot centers is fine, and the same thing on the other one. I'm really kind of combining both applications. Yes. I mean, you know.
There are comparable widths on both of them, 350
okay.
to 400 feet, depending on the curvature.
Okay, well, that's my tree question. The other question that I have, twofold, is the city is replete with chain link fences, and it's been just overrun with chain link fence mania. This is the Scenic River Overlay District. I don't know what's going to go up and down that river, but as I told you before the meeting, these excursion boats or what, you know, I mean, people will be on this. And to look over this greenery and see a chain link fence, I really don't think is appropriate, particularly when when you're into this Scenic River Overlay District, and the purpose of that is to create the Oklahoma River as being some inviting thing that you can get on the river.
Bob, I think what they said is they would do site-proof screening with brick columns and either wood infill. Is that not what you said, Dennis?
We were talking about the dumpsters. He's talking about...
No, I'm talking about
okay. We're talking about the property line now.
The property line.
What are you planning there?
The chain link fence.
We anticipated if fencing was required, we'd put up chain link fencing. That's what you see a lot out there. A lot of times you don't see any fencing at all, but what are you wanting to see?
Nick, you have something?
I have a general question. This has been before the River Design Committee, and they have approved it. Was it before them with the same TEs we're looking at? Or are these added?
These would have been added as part of this process. I don't know what the discussion was during Scenic River. I don't know if they talked about the fence or not.
We did have some discussion in regard to visibility, and I was just talking to Mr. Brown that one of the things I think is important, and I'll point it out while he talks, but there's a large grade differential between where the river is and where our buildings are. So,
for informational purposes, from the city's property, all you can see of the existing buildings is the top maybe 10 to 15 feet. Keep in mind these are buildings that the grade floor elevation's 4 feet above the ground. You then have 20 feet of interior height, so you're probably 30-foot tall building. You can't see the ground from the city's property. So currently, in order to be able to see a chain link fence on either of the three pieces of property, the city would have to go in and remove the trees that's on their property and destroy the natural barrier that currently exists.
Okay.
But I appreciate that, but if the city does remove the trees, you've got a chain link fence. I really have a hard time with it. And Nick, I agree when I read that they had approved this, but...
Bob, it goes beyond that. My concern here is when we did the Scenic River Ordinance, you'll recall, we acknowledged, everyone acknowledged, that there are industrial uses all up and down the river. Those uses are going to be allowed and untouched. And now when we come back and override, the Scenic River's already seen it. Now we're adding more layer of hoops to jump through. Is there going to be another staff report when this goes to council for 2 more hoops to jump through? Where do we stop? This is an established area. It's been there for at least 3 river plans that I know of that Douglas has done, and now we're going to further tweak it.
But not to argue, but in this application, we have uses that are unrelated to a warehouse. We have retail sales, we have eating establishments, we have laundry services. All of these are being requested, which are somewhat different than a warehouse,
And you know why they're there?
because they might want to do some stuff on that land.
And also because we changed our zoning code to put a bunch of that stuff in these. So,
Mr.
you know,
Chairman?
which side of our mouths do we want to talk out of?
Well, okay,
You know.
let me, then, I mean, I do agree with you, Nick, but let me ask another question that I asked Dennis before the meeting. In item number 10 of your SPUD, in the last sentence, the Riverfront Design Committee shall not consider compliance with the Scenic River Overlay Design District regulations and guidelines when reviewing an application for a certificate of approval. I don't get that. I still don't. Why wouldn't they comply with the guidelines that they have?
Janice?
I have a question about that also, and I think it ties into the comment that Councilman Gales, or that Commissioner Gales made, and that is that if you look at the front page of the staff report, it says that the Riverfront Design Committee recommended approval if certain undesirable uses were excluded and it incorporated the design regulations and guidelines of the design district. But now we're saying, but we're not going to consider those. We're going to exclude some uses, but we're not going to consider the design regulations.
Not true. Let me tell you what happened.
Well, that sounds like what the section he just read says.
It might say that, but I can tell you what happened because I've been at every hearing. Mr. Brown's been at every hearing but one. And when we went to the Scenic Review Commission, the first thing that they were concerned about was compatibility. So we went through that. We've been there 3 times. And what you have to realize is the regulations for the Scenic River Overlay provide for regulations that deal with commercial and office kinds of uses. They don't contemplate industrial. Well,
That seems to sort of fly in the face of what Commissioner Gales was saying.
No.
About these uses having always been there and were recognized to continue to exist.
well, this has been zoned since the 60s for industrial. The city came in and made a decision that they were going to provide a new set of zoning regulations, and they decided to cut it off in the middle of a street. Unfortunately, my client owned property on the south side of that. Therefore, the ability to develop it for industrial, which had been in place since the 60s, was taken away. When we went to the Scenic River Overlay Group, they recognized that this probably was an appropriate area for industrial, and so that's why 2 things happened. At the last meeting, the code had been changed, and we were at least told that the staff didn't have a problem with the uses. Now, obviously, the staff report doesn't reflect that, so we have come up and we've eliminated additional uses, and that's where we stand today. We're fine with that. The second piece of it that you've got to recognize is we were told, go sit down with staff, work on guidelines that will work with industrial and be compatible with the river. Put them in your SPUD, and that's the guidelines that will govern this property. So we've done everything we've been asked to. And I've had at least 2 meetings with Mr. Chambliss and at least 2 meetings with Scotty Montgomery and appeared before the commission 3 times. So, if something is inaccurate in the staff report, I apologize for that. But bottom line is, we were told, go come up with development regulations that will protect the river and allow you to develop this for industrial. We've done that.
How long has your building been there? How long has it been built?
Mid-'70s.
When did the district come in? When was this Scenic River Overlay District commenced?
3 or 4 years ago.
3.
I'd have said 2.
Has the property been in use as an industrial site since it's built? So it's currently in use right now, right?
Where, on the developed lot, yes.
Yeah, in this case right here, just only with respect to the case the building that we're looking at right there.
The building has been in full use since the day it was constructed for, industrial uses, multi-tenant, just as the remainder of the park has.
Okay.
If you look at the remainder of the park, this gives you a good example of all the buildings that are on the south side of the street that are industrial uses.
When the Scenic River Overlay District was developed, it contemplated, development for the uses that Mr. Box had illustrated before, stuff that's going to orient to the river. What it intended to do, what it tried to do, was to prevent any further heavy industrial development along the river. And in consideration of that, they took a fairly broad buffer on either side of the river and excluded industrial. But this area is an existing light industrial area that it's not going to develop for anything else unless that tornado occurs. But
I want to make sure the Commission knows, I've had several meetings with the Planning Director, and this was the mechanism we thought would probably be the easiest to work it out to allow for a continual use that was consistent with what's been there since the 60s. So it's not like we're avoiding regulations. We've actually put regulations in place that the staff's comfortable with, and with regard to the uses, they're a lot more restrictive than all the other properties on the north side of the street.
Well, and that's probably as it should be. I was about to say the same thing Russell did, which is the intent was to not have growth of those kinds of activities along the river. I can see that this would be an area where an exception should be made because not, as Russell said, nothing else is going to happen there. I do have a question about the staff report, and Janice brought it up, and I would like to know, just for information, what the Riverfront Design Committee said about the regulations and guidelines for the overlay district. But in any case, I think an exception should be made for these two sites.
Well, let me make one small argument against that. I'm not opposed to putting this into a place where you can do what you want to do with the application that we have in front of us now. But the application that we'll hear next has to do with vacant land. There's not a building on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I still think, though, that looking at what is all around it, on both the east and west side of it, that nothing else is going to happen but what they're asking for.
That additional land is contiguous part of this industrial park.
Right.
Then rhetorically, what is the purpose then of the Scenic River Overlay statements that to the extent that there's not industrial development, we don't want industrial development to occur?
If there was a single industrial building there along that stretch and we said we didn't want any more, it would be a reasonable thing possibly to say we don't want the rest of that half mile to develop as industrial because it's really not predominantly industrial now. But this is industrial all except for the one site that's in addition to this industrial park. And nothing else is going to happen there but what the applicant is asking for. It's not going to change the character of that area of the river at all. And that's really what the Scenic River Overlay is designed to do.
Is that curve a drainage? I mean, is that a stream, concrete, the curve to the north?
It's a drainage canal.
That. Is that a drainage? Okay.
Mike?
Yeah, I think we need to.
That's probably right.
I think we need to do these things serially. I think we need to take this application, decide what we're going to do with this, then move to the second application, because I think our comments at least for me, that there may be some differences between the two, but I think this, clearly for me, this existing industrial building that's been in constant use from what I can gather as an industrial site since the mid-1970s, and they cut the street, that we arbitrarily, potentially maybe not arbitrarily, I'd like to think that we did not do it arbitrarily, but we chose, as part of the overlay district, to effectively take it away, take that use away from it, absent some action by us in this particular context. I am curious as to wonder if, had this been blown away the other day in the big tornado, where the developer or the owner would be left. Then they have to come back. What's the replacement value? I mean, this is a potential conundrum for us, I think, and in this particular context. So I think we need to deal with this one. Then we'll talk about the empty land.
Can I ask just one question?
Yes, James.
On one of the uses? At first, I was looking at the above-ground flammable liquid storage. In the original application, it has above-ground flammable liquid storage general. Do you presently have above-ground storage of flammable liquids?
No, and after talking to your staff indicates that that's only gasoline, so we don't mind taking that out.
Okay, so in your document, you have restricted opposed to general. Mm-hmm. So are we taking it out, or are we going to?
Just let's take
strike
that
it
out.
on your document too? Okay, thank you. And you're still going to go with a green or black chain link fence?
Either one of those colors I like.
Okay, Commissioners.
Just out of curiosity, why is this up here now? Janice raised a point. Why are we here today? I mean, what is the genesis of this application, Dennis?
Mr. Brown came to me and said, I've got some real concerns with regard to my insurance policy, my lenders, and restrictions and specifics in
So you have
regard
some debt
to...
covenants issues potentially that...
Exactly, and potential future uses. How do we solve it? And we've been spending the last year going through the process, and we're now here. You're going to see more of these in the future, I think. I think this little business park, industrial park, is different than what you see in other areas, so I think the city has done a very good job drawing the lines, but there's got to be exceptions to the rule, and this is, I think, an exception to the rule. And the other part of that is, if there are any concerns, the good news is the city owns the property next to the river. But that's what brought it about.
Okay.
All right.
So where are we on the TEs now?
Well, I'm fine with the TEs now that I have an explanation as to why Dennis wanted to modify them. And we're taking out one more use, which is restricted above-ground flammable fuel storage, and incorporating Dennis's memorandum for the removal of additional uses. If we can do that, I'll take a motion.
My question about the uses is whether we really think this is an appropriate place for a daycare center. Did I not see that was an allowed use, child care center, in this industrial area?
Yeah, you might have a warehouse. They might have an office that they want to be able to keep their kids. Don't know, but.
Yeah. I have some real concerns about this application, and we're sort of starting off with the assumption that somebody just sat down with a box of crayons and drew this line, and where they put it doesn't make any sense. But there must be some history there.
That's the problem, and that's what's frustrating me to no end with this application. The history is, if you guys went through it, as I did, there was a long and protracted set of hearings on getting this overlay district tweaked just right where to draw the lines, how the lines should be drawn, what should be included, what shouldn't be included. And we're making all these representations. This is how it's going to be. We're not going to dance on somebody's head that's already there, yada, yada, yada. Then we all seem to conveniently go to sleep that night, get up the next morning in a new world, and say, oh, well, what we said then maybe doesn't matter. And now we start jumping on these people, picking at them, tweaking at them. No wonder this city doesn't have any credibility when people say, I've been doing this for a year. Why does it have to be a war every time somebody comes before a board or a commission asking for something that makes sense? This application makes absolute sense. It's very, very consistent with the history of what went on when this ordinance was adopted. Now, with a couple of changes in boards and commissions, all of a sudden everybody says, oh, well, King's X, we don't want to play by the rules we adopted. We want to further tweak them and have some more hoops for people to jump through. This frustrates me. I know it frustrates applicants, and I don't blame them. I tell you, I don't blame them. This application, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Staff's good with it. They've agreed to the TEs, and we are sitting here tweaking and mussing and fussing over something that we should have summarily looked at and approved.
Well, I don't agree with most of what you just said. I'm glad that we have you to provide us with some institutional memory, but the only thing we have to go by is what's left in black and white. People who don't go to hearings or aren't still around 10 years later don't know what was sort of agreed or gentleman's handshake or wink, wink, whatever. All we can go by is what we have. There's a line. This is in the overlay. I think people who come after have to assume there's a reason for that, and that reason doesn't include, oh, but we told people that they were King's X'd and it wouldn't count for them. If the overlay doesn't account at all for industrial uses, that doesn't seem to make sense to me with those uses that are existing within the area. Unless the intent was to let them exist, they existed, but not to expand and not to upgrade. I mean, if that's not the understanding, if that's not what it really says, then I need to have that explained to me. I'm not mad at anybody here. I'm not frustrated by the process. I just need to have it explained.
I thought that's what the director and the chairman explained. That's what I heard.
Well, maybe I heard something different.
Well, regardless of what the river overlay ordinance says specifically, we're still here to make judgments with respect to individual sites when there's a reason to make a judgment and to call for an exception when there's a situation that that is suited for. I see this quite a bit differently than I see an area of vacant land along the river, which I would not want to see become industrial. That clearly is the intent. I mean, when this river was included as a part of the first MAPS program, I thought ultimately it would be the most significant single project in the original 9 MAPS votes. Now it might be a 30 or 50 year project to see it evolve the way we might envision and hope that it would. So yes, we would not want to build a whole lot of new industrial, light, moderate, or heavy in areas where it isn't already in existence. But we weren't taking property away from people who had operating businesses along the river all these years before. Generally, the idea is not to have a lot of expansion of those activities, but I look at a site like this and say, well, what else would you do? You can't say, well, we have a single lot that is vacant here, so what we really ought to do is encourage that all these other buildings come down so we have a half-mile strip of vacant land. should allow them to infill that one site.
We don't, just as, I'm inclined to agree with you. I just want one, Dennis, you don't want to have any outdoor storage here, right? Outdoor storage? You have none? Do you have outdoor storage on this site?
Not if it's light
Or
industrial.
do you anticipate it?
We do not, and the building takes up the entire site. So
Okay.
I would not anticipate.
All right. All right.
Mr. Chairman, could I make a
Yes, James.
motion that we approve this application as modified, adopting the memo that Dennis submitted with the corrections of deleting the use.
Restricted above ground
use, above ground.
flammable fuel storage.
Removing all of above ground.
That's a motion. Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve item 6 as modified. Excuse me, 5 as modified. Cast your votes. It's approved.
Item 6 is SPD 545, in the same area, rezoning properties on Will Rogers Parkway to SPD 545.
Dennis, you're looking at, I'll wait for Dennis. You're looking at essentially the same list of uses, the same restriction on uses, the same TE
Yes, sir.
changes.
Yes, sir. When we went to the commission, the River Commission, they looked at each case at a different time. When we came on the second case, they said, we want you to make sure you develop the same regulations that would apply to the first case. And so we've agreed to do that, and that's what you have, is 2 mirror spuds.
And again, you would eliminate restricted above-ground flammable fuel storage?
Yes, sir.
Just one thing, just in preservation of my own sanity, the property that we just zoned, the property that now is the subject site that you have outlined on your memo, in between there are 2 or 3 other buildings, right? You guys own those? Okay.
No, we do not.
All right.
And that goes for going to the west.
West.
Yeah.
So this is all, at least for you, this particular applicant, this is our last visit to this
It's the last
site.
dance. This is the last dance for us.
Just wanted to ask that question. Thank you.
Is the elevation of these 2 vacant parcels the same elevation that you described on the one that's existing that we just approved?
It's comparable. I mean, a few feet difference, but it's not.
Well, different, lower.
No, I'd say it's comparable. I mean, the street seems relatively flat except for whatever ordinary amount of drainage, and the lots are at street level. Is that?
I mean, this gets back to the fencing, and you're going to build something on this. I mean, this is a brand new building with landscaping on the south side, all the requirements that you have in the first application for landscaping on the river side, and still you're going to do a green or black chain link fence.
There may be no need for a fence at all. Depends on what the final constructed building is, or some future tenant use.
Okay.
But we currently have no plans to construct anything. We're trying to preserve our ability to construct an industrial use building.
Can I ask a question? From your property to the river, who owns that property? This, yes. Okay, I know they owned it up on the front end, but they own it all the way through. Okay. Yes.
What about outdoor storage on this property? It's undeveloped.
Could have it. You'd have to meet screening requirements and all that, but you could have it.
So we may have outdoor storage backing up to the river,
No, backing up to the city.
to the city's property. What's the distance between there and the river?
Well, at the greatest depth, it's probably over 300 feet. At the narrowest, it's 100 to 150 feet.
what's the land look like between the grade from the river? If I'm floating down the river on one of the water taxis there, I'm looking back to the northwest, I guess, or even back to the northeast on this property. What do I see? If I'm on the, I mean, I haven't walked the site, so I'm interested in to see what the effect is of that particular outdoor storage backing up to the river. Obviously, from an aesthetic view, I am on your other side. You're covered by building. It is what it is. This one, though, it could have a negative impact, I think, potentially on the river if we have a bunch of cranes and outdoor giant caterpillars and dump trucks and things that, no offense to those uses, but if I've got Atlas Paving or something like that out there, my good friend Bruce Smith's place, well, that may not be a good storage look for outdoor from that particular site. And I don't know that I could be supportive of that. Understanding your industrial use argument, I got that, but I think that would be a concern if they'd drawn the line right on your property line one way or the other.
Well, to answer your question about what do you see, I've never personally taken the river tour. I have stood at the dock on the south side of the river,
okay,
and I have driven from our property down onto the city's property on the north side of the river. When you're on the south side of the river looking across, the only thing you can see of the existing buildings and the elevation of the trees remains fairly constant is the top 1/3 of the building. You cannot see the vacant lot from the south side of the river. I have to assume that means you're not going to be able to see it from the river itself because the river is actually lower than the dirt on the south side. Just for your own information, there is a nice homeless community in there that utilizes that area. You do see that.
You mean in the trees there? Right in that area?
Right in that area. Also, where you see this divergence of the water, the Corps of Engineers went in there 8 or 9 years ago and reworked all of that to preserve it as a wetland. So that suggests to me that likelihood of the city of Oklahoma City going in to be able to cut down the trees is probably pretty slim because the Corps of Engineers, as I understand it, controls.
What do you propose to do for screening on the south side from the river with respect to this undeveloped property? Again, this is the main reason, one of the reasons why I wanted to segregate these two applications. One has some challenges, one may not have some challenges. And I understand the river district and we excluded these industrial uses, but that's a separate topic here today. We're here on an SPUD, so I think there's some considerations that I want to potentially extract with respect to the river on that south side. To be honest, Dennis.
That was a formal question, right?
Yeah, that was a question.
And the answer is if we do outside storage on those two vacant parcels, then on the parcel we do outside storage, we'll put site-proof screening on instead of chain link.
And landscaping on that side?
You have to do landscaping anyway.
That'll
be with
my
the landscape ordinance.
On the outdoor storage, Mike.
Yeah.
That, okay, you're going to do, if you want that in there, then site-proof fencing from the river to cover the outdoor storage. You'll agree to that?
On our property, and keep in mind,
We understand.
Mr. Brown said there's trees down there and it goes from 150 to 300 feet, but that's okay. That's the city property.
Well, I'd like to assume that the city, since it established that overlay district, would maintain that
200 here.
characteristic.
200
Never
there.
can tell. Maybe reasons later on that you can't do that.
Right.
And so how high would that screening be? I think it needs to be at least to be 8 feet at minimum. It's got, I mean, you can't screen anything that's meaningful outdoors, Dennis, if it's not 8 feet tall. The 6-foot screen barely screens my car.
We'll do 8.
Okay, Commissioners, anything else, or can we move this along? A motion, maybe?
So think it's the motion that James made with respect to the use units and then adding the TE with respect or the outdoor storage. She'll have 8-foot site-proof screening in any area that's used for outdoor storage or proposed to be used for outdoor storage. Is that right? Mm-hmm.
And restricted above-ground flammable fuels eliminated.
Right.
So the same.
Right.
Is that agreeable, Dennis?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve item 6 as conditioned. Cast your votes. That's approved. Thank you.
Item 7 is SPUD 556, an application by Bodie Enterprises to rezone 1021 Southwest 45th Street from R1 Single Family to SPUD 556 in Ward 4.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Dennis Fox. I have coordinated with your staff, and with regard to this application, I've got a handout that has some pictures, but one of the things that we're trying to do is provide for parking that will allow for adequate parking for the office and hospital uses that are to the north. As this exhibit goes around, in talking to your staff, we decided that it would be a opportunity for me to discuss with you the TEs that worked and the ones that didn't work. And so after you get your exhibits, I can tell you we agreed to 1, 2, and 3, and on 2 that would be the O2 regulations. With regard to number 4, we would propose the fence that is the fence is shown on the front page, and instead of doing a 3-foot parking island on the east and or within the parking lot, we would propose to put 13 2-inch caliber trees all along the street, not only on our property, but it would also be on the other properties that have parking lots. And so we think that that would be better landscaping than just providing small little niches within the parking area.
So you're talking, Dennis, about planting trees along Southwest 44th Street west to South Douglas. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And that'd be at least 2-inch caliper, and my calculations show that if we put them on 25-foot centers, it'd be at least 13, which we'd agree to. We have continued this case so we could coordinate with staff, and I want to thank them for working with us. We don't know of any protests. If you look at the staff report and you analyze the map they've shown, what you find is there's really now only 2 residences that exist, and so what we're trying to do is provide protection for the residents that exist, but also recognize that ultimately probably what we'll find is these properties will be attached and utilized as part of the properties just to the north. So we'd ask your approval with those modifications.
Commissioners, any comments or discussion?
To clarify, this picture of this fence, is that on the east boundary?
Yes, sir.
So you're okay with TE3? I mean, it says, wood fence with brick columns. I'm just trying to, I got a bit confused.
Yeah, the answer.
You're not going to do TE.
I agreed to TE 1, 2, and 3, and on 2 that'd be O2 regulations.
And then 4,
we agree with
4 is for, instead of doing the islands, you're going to landscape the whole street to Douglas.
That's right. Okay. Correct.
I like that.
I think that's a good trade.
I think that's a
and
good
then we
trade.
agree with TE 5.
Okay.
I move approval of the application with that modification.
Second. Okay, with a motion and a second to approve item 7, cast your votes. It's approved.
Thank you very much.
Janice, you didn't vote. Did you mean to? Okay.
Item 8 is PC 10251, an application by Kings Crown Homes to rezone land north of Southeast 89th Street and east of Santa Fe from C3 to RIZL, single-family zero lot line in Ward 4.
Good afternoon. I'm Kendall Dillon with Craft and Toll Sparks. I also have the applicant, Mr. Clint King, here with me today in case you have any questions for him. But this application is to obviously rezone this 13-acre parcel from straight C3 zoning down to R1ZL. And if you're very familiar with this location, you'll know that as you go out from this site, that just about the entire area over there is already developed and has been that way for a while.
Yep.
But yet this tract of C3 continues to sit there undeveloped and for the most part it's been kind of passed over. So we have a great opportunity at this point to kind of support what I believe your plan recommends and to develop this piece of property as, once again, a single family. It'll be a gated residential community. And if you look as far as the adjacent zonings, we've got a police substation to the south with a regional detention facility. Got C3 there to the west. Immediately to the north, we've got R2, which is duplexes already developed, and then you've got the R4 and apartments over to the east. So we feel like that it's a really compatible and a great opportunity to develop this parcel. Staff's recommended approval. I will mention as well that we went ahead and sent a letter out to all the adjacent property owners and set up a pre-development meeting back in April, to which the lodge there to the east was kind enough to let us use their facilities on one of their meeting nights. And we met with the lodge folks. The owner of the apartments did show up, but the meeting went really well. Everybody seemed to be in favor of what we were doing, so we just asked for your approval.
Let me ask you one thing, Kendall.
Sure.
On T number 8 about the garage front.
On the preliminary plat?
Yes.
Okay. We want to skip over to that.
We're not there yet. We're talking about zone. We're on number 8 at the moment.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
It's wrong.
Yeah, we'll be there in a minute. Well, same, it's related, yes.
All right. I move approval of the application.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve item 8. Cast your votes. And that's approved.
Yeah.
Now we're on item 9. James?
That was the, I'll ask the question now. Item T number 8, the design option for the garages must be addressed with the final plat.
Sure. And we will agree to that TE, obviously, and we'll for sure address those with the final plat. However, I will tell you, I think what our plan is to go ahead and to plant the 2, and we will do the right-of-way trees, given that the water line issue is resolved with them. But we'll agree to that aspect of it, which is one of the considerations in your policy.
Good.
So we'll do that, but obviously keep in mind, and just to reiterate what we're trying to do on this particular tract, which basically is an infill parcel, given the other potential uses of this, I think this is a really good use for this piece of property. And we are limited. I mean, we've pretty much got to keep our density to make the thing financially work, given that it is C3 property. So that we basically are doing what we can do, but that's how we plan on addressing that issue.
Trees to soften it, so appreciate that effort.
You bet.
Yeah, that's certainly, and you have some nice, your lot streets are not long given the
Correct.
size of the piece of property, and you've got probably about as many bins as you can get in that short
We've done everything we can do.
track. All right, thank you.
No protesters.
No, and you'll tell us how we plan to use the common areas at the next stage.
I can discuss it then. We are providing 1.4 acres of common area, which I think it well exceeds your code. I think 4/10 of an acre, close to a half acre, we will use as recreational common area. The plan is to have park benches and a gazebo. That's probably most of the amenities that we're going to include in it. But if you look at typically, because we also had the privilege of doing one that will be identical to this on basically the southwest corner. But we are almost entirely retired folks and some single-family mothers, of which there's not a lot of use. There's no kids in them. So for playground equipment or anything like that, they do enjoy, like I say, the park benches and the gazebos to look at. Those will be wet bottom ponds that we have as you come in the entrance on both the right and the left. We'll have fountains in them and those sort of things so that they can sit out there and
Single-family mothers without children.
That's predominant, or single, let me back up. We do have, for instance, in our other one, Clint and I were discussing this earlier today, almost everybody originally on his initial sales, we don't know what's happened since, but everybody was retired folks. We get a lot of widows, but he did have one single family, or I'll get it right here in a little bit, single parent, a lady, and she did have one young son in the previous addition that we did. For the most part, there are no kids, is what I'm trying to say.
That's a lot of proxy grandparents, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have a motion? We have no one to protest?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second to approve item 9. Cast your votes, and it's approved.
Item 10 is C 5391, an extension of the preliminary plat of Oak Ridge Trails Edition, Ward 4.
Chris Anderson, you're up.
Good afternoon. To be honest with you, I didn't know that was on today. Chris Anderson, SMC Engineering, representing the developer. This is a preliminary plat that has pretty well been built out. The section to the north, I think, is the part that we're actually talking about getting I'm confused with this because it's showing the residential area. That's already built. The area on the plat on the notification I got was for the north area, the industrial part, to be extended, the industrial commercial area.
This is the first request for an extension. It's basically automatic, and of course, no one has signed up.
I move approval. Second.
A motion and second to approve item 10. Cast your votes, and you're approved. Thank you.
Item 11 is PUD 1414, an application by Allen Engineering Services to rezone property north of Southwest 89th Street and west of Southwestern Avenue from PUD 1392 to PUD 1414.
My name's Charles Allen. Allen Engineering Services. I think we've got a new layout that meets all the technical evaluations. We agree with all those, and I think I'd like to clarify T number 4. I think it says constructing Southwest 87th Street or meeting internal distribution, and we've redone the site to allow a fire truck to maneuver through the development. We don't intend on constructing 87th Street. Happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, no one has signed up.
Move approval.
A motion and second to approve item 11. Cast your votes, and it's approved.
Item 12 is PC 10255, an application by Gregory Newton to rezone 801 Southwest 66th Street from R1 single family to R2 medium low density in Ward 5.
Which one are we on? Is the applicant here?
My name is Greg Newton.
Give us your name and address.
Greg Newton, 3009 North Ann Arbor, Oklahoma City.
Thank you. And you are intending to build a duplex at the end of 66th Street?
Yes, sir.
Does the street extend in front of your property?
It ends right at the beginning of my property. The street dead ends right there. Right there. You can kind of see a shaded back line where the street actually ends. That's pretty correct where the pavement ends.
Well, you may run into an issue at the building permit stage where you have to extend 66th Street so you have frontage on an approved city street.
Well, according to the zoning laws for the duplex, the property fits on all sides, front, back, and side to side for what we want to do for the duplex.
Well, I'm not saying you can't build a duplex. I'm suggesting that the staff may ask you to complete 66th Street so there's a city street in front of your property so you have access from a city street.
There is access from the street. The street actually does run to the east side of the property. So
is it paved to city standards or is it dirt?
It is paved to city standards.
Not how it appears on the staff report is why I'm asking the question.
I see.
We do have someone signed up, Commissioners. Joel Hammond. If you'd come to this podium, please, to my right. If you'd give us your name and address for the record and share your concerns.
Sure. It's Joel Hammond, 828 Southwest 66th Street, representing Can-Am Holdings. We have a children's dental office right on the same street. And our main concern is just that these areas, these used to all be, I guess, part and parcel with Naylor Construction. You can see the building on the north side of the street, somewhere in the middle there, and an empty lot adjacent to this that I think is currently listed as R2, but nothing's been done with it.
Which would permit duplex housing.
That's correct. I'm sorry?
I say the R2 zoning would permit duplex housing on that vacant site.
Yes, I noticed that as well. That's our main reason for coming here, was just to see what we can do about property erosion and high-density, low-income housing showing up on the street with primarily office-based. There's a dental office on the north side of 66th Street at the corner, an insurance company at the south side of 66th Street at the corner, and our children's dental office is on the south side of the street, right across the street from where Naylor Construction used to be. It's currently a vacant office building.
Well, you're in sort of a mixed-use area. If you look at it, you've got duplexes to the north of this site, R1 zoning and a house to the south, R2 or R1 zoning to the east.
The R1 zoning on the directly to our east of the O2 on the south side is the original owner of all that land, I guess.
Well, that's
been there for 100 years.
But
what's that? Vacant office, that was Naylor Construction, where O1 is, and R2 vacant next to it was also Naylor Constructions. They used to just have that. I guess they're going to build more building.
How would a duplex affect your use?
Our main concern was that the whole street, we weren't sure if that R1 package was part of the R2 package, and somebody was trying to change the whole thing to be a high-density.
You might get more dental patients if you have more people living on your block.
It's just that one little rectangle area in this application.
Yeah.
The gentleman that owns the rest of the property, you can see this Lightning Creek with that channel it runs through. It's a concrete channel.
Right.
There was a lot of dumping going on in that area. So he owns that except for the parcel that I own that you see highlighted. And he put up guardrail to stop all the dumping that was being placed at the end. It's a dead end, and it goes all the way out to the channel. He wasn't aware that I owned that property, and he placed the guardrail in front of my property. I didn't mind it stopping the dumping of a lot of waste right now. So I think getting more people in that area would eliminate a lot of dumping that's going on right now because there's no residents right there.
Mike?
I mean, just as to the protesters' concern, I've actually, given that there is still R1 zoning in the area, I don't know how much farther, may not be particularly viable, but I don't know how much farther back off of Western we want to extend the office commercial uses that somewhat surround that, the duplexes to the north there, et cetera. It seems to me the duplexes, the R2 uses, are probably appropriate for that, to buffer that going back to the east and across the street from the R1 there. It just seems like a pretty appropriate use to me. The street, though, you may have to build that street out, just so you know. That's not my call, but...
That'll happen at the building permit stage if it does. That won't be anything we'll decide here, but just a heads up, so to speak.
And actually, I'm Denny Pickleson for the home builder for my partner Greg. We'll have to extend the street for parking purposes, so it'll have to be done whether we want to or not.
That's kind of what I thought. That's why I wanted to mention it. Any other discussion?
If there's no other protest or anything, I move to approve the application.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve item 12. Cast your votes. And it's approved. Thank you.
Item 13 is PC 10254, an application by James Barker to rezone 1705 Northwest 1st Street from R2 to I2 Moderate Industrial in Ward 6.
You give us your name and address, please?
James Barker, 10600 South Walker, Oklahoma City.
Thank you. This item is in an area that's obviously changing, Commissioners.
I just would like to hear from the applicant what his problems, what made you want to come down here today to rezone this or file this
I want to put a
application?
fence around it. And the city wouldn't even give me a permit to put a fence around it to keep trash and stuff on. People dump tires and dump garbage and everything else. So it's been going on for 20-some years. And so I decided I wanted to fence it, but your city wouldn't give me a permit to fence it. So I had to rezone it so I could fence it.
Okay.
Mr. Barker, what kind of fence are you planning to construct?
I'll probably put up the stockade fence, more than likely. Or either chain link or stockade. Stockade's what I've been thinking about putting up.
No one signs the Commissioners. The motion is second to approve item 13. Cast your votes, and you're approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Item 14 is SPUD 559, an application by LM Real Estate Company to rezone 13,008 Broadway Extension from SPUD 354 to SPUD 559.
My name is Malik Massid, 1010 Castle Road, Edmond, Oklahoma 73034. I represent LM Real Estate and the Bob Water Group in their real estate development activities. What we originally had a PUD that allowed for certain styles of pylon signs that indicate where each dealership is located. We put a Hummer dealership in there, and the pylon sign wanted a pylon sign without a covered pole base. And in light of that, we filed for SPUD 354 to allow for that. But in filing that, we filed for a sign that had 20-foot height and 200 thereabouts square foot of face. Now that the Hummer dealership has gone bye-bye, we're now putting a Land Rover dealership in its place, as well as a Subaru dealership to share that building. The Land Rover sign is a 30-foot sign, and the square footage on the sign, if you've seen the design of it, they count the square footage from top to bottom instead of just where the sign Land Rover is itself. So that well exceeds what the SPUD 354 allowed, so we had to refile. I refiled a new SPUD, basically going back to the limitations of the PUD 918 of 47 feet and 500 square feet of face, so, and allowing for 3 signs. We currently have a Subaru pylon sign and are looking to put a Land Rover sign in that SPUD and possible used car sign in the future.
So we're talking about a 30-foot monument sign that just says Land Rover at the top?
It says Land Rover top. It has green metal paneling that goes all the way to the base.
Well, I don't know what the sentiment of the other commissioners is, but there's a sign forest there now.
Correct.
And you want to take down one sign and add 2 or 3.
We currently are still 2 signs and about 700 square feet shy of what the PUD allowed in the first place.
And I believe that's part of the problem. There is, on my staff report, still some blood soaking through from the Hummer hearings when the Hummer sign was approved.
Oh, really?
And
it was before my time.
It was a...
They didn't tell you about that before you came down?
Quite a protracted deal. And this just appears to me that we're throwing some gasoline on the fire. We're trading one sign for 3 bigger ones. That really helps the sign pollution out there.
We're just trading one for one. Subaru took the place of a Saturn sign. Saturn sign took the place of an earlier sign that's now a Kia sign that moved outside north into the PUD. We're just swapping the Hummer sign for a Land Rover sign.
Well, if you're short 2 signs and so many hundred square feet under the PUD, why are you here?
because it doesn't fall under the PUD, it falls under the SPUD.
The Hummer SPUD.
Which
not
is
the overall PUD.
The reason why we had to file the SPUD is because the Hummer pull base, doesn't cover, it's the Hummer side. It's just
that's where we're going. The Hummer SPUD provided for what's there, the metallic.
Right.
Gutter.
Yeah. Hummer sign. The way I read this staff report, that sign goes away.
Hummer sign will disappear, but go into a hangar.
The proposed SPUD provides for one 47-foot, 500-square-foot sign. What's going away is a 25-foot tall, 90-square-foot sign. So we're providing for one 47-foot, 500-foot sign, plus two 47-foot tall, 315-square-foot signs. So is the staff report incorrect, or are we trading one for three? No. And not only one for three, but we're trading for three taller, larger signs than are there.
I'm trying to get back to what the PUD originally stated. In other words, back to where before the SPUD 354 was filed.
Well, we modified that in order to give you what you asked for then. If
I could have done this easier and just wiped SPUD 354 off that map, I could have done it that way. But
well, you can't,
but
unfortunately.
I can't.
Well, are you in a big hurry on this business sign?
I had to go plug the meter again, so no.
Well, now, other than that, well, what I meant was I don't have a particularly great visual image about the true nature of all the signs that we have on the location. I hate to belabor this, but the applicant and burden him with some additional work. I might suggest, though, that it's given just counting might benefit you if you kind of gave us come back and gave us a better idea about exactly where everything is and what everything looks like and what was and what is coming up. Would you do that?
We have one sign for every dealership.
I can tell you, Mike, that as you drive along there at 50 or 60 miles an hour, which is the speed limit, and if you are looking for the car dealership of your choice among the signs that are there now, pretty hard to find.
I am a customer up there, so I fortunately know.
We hope it's on the south part, the Baltimore part, not the Baltimore.
You're not the only one who's a customer in that area, but I think you go there because you pretty well know what's there.
Right.
If you drive one of those makes and models, you know where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure 3 more giant signs. I'm not a fan of that idea. I'll be real clear about it.
Well, let me be even more clear. If you come back with what Mike is suggesting, with an analysis of what's allowed, the frustration that I have is that I can't do anything about what's allowed. I wouldn't vote in a million years for any additional 47-foot signs on the Broadway extension. It will not happen from where I'm sitting.
I'm not asking for a 47-foot. I'm asking.
That's my point about the staff report.
You're asking for 3 47-foot signs.
The staff report says 3 additional 47-foot signs.
In the report, it shows a 30-foot Land Rover sign, which I'm asking for. I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for the limits to be extended back up to the PUD original limits so that.
I would never agree to that because I was on the Planning Commission only a year and a half, I think, when the Hummer thing came on, and my objection was that this city is so full of pole signs you can't see the sky.
Well, this goes back to an earlier discussion we had today, which is the trade you made 3 or 4 years ago was to waive those signs in return for getting the Hummer sign.
Right.
And that was the deal you made 3 years ago, and now you don't want to make that deal.
Well, but if I could make a deal right now, I'd just say, give me one sign. And that one sign is just swapping a Hummer sign.
It will be the same size as the Hummer sign.
The application
I can't do that. I'm restricted by law.
This application, as it sits before us, as I understand it, if I'm incorrect, somebody needs to correct me, we are giving up our 90-foot Hummer sign 90 square feet, and we were providing for an additional 1,130 square feet of signage.
No.
That's what my report says.
Whoa.
So I suggest you take Mr. Hensley's.
That's my issue here.
I suggest you take
my point being is this.
and get it to us what you really want and with some visuals.
I got it to y'all. I asked for 500 square feet, and all I need is 315 square feet. I went back to what the PUD originally stated, that no sign should be over 500 square feet in total per sign, or 2,700 square feet for the entire site, the entire PUD, and we're well under that. And I just need a Hummer sign to swap out to a Land Rover sign. I could care less about the third sign. You can write that off.
Unfortunately, the Hummer sign's contained in an SPUD that gives you a Hummer sign, but not potentially what you're telling me. And I'm not arguing with the corporate requirements of Land Rover. I can't do anything about that. Perhaps you can't either.
But what you're saying is not what I have in front of me.
Not to do that.
Let's kind of cut to the chase here. This does not say today, apparently, what you are seeking. What Commissioner Hensley is suggesting you do is get with the staff, maybe take a couple of week continuance.
It says right here, 47-foot sign, 500 square foot maximum display area for a new pole sign containing manufactured nameplate is 315 square feet. That's what I filed.
Well, I understand that. But that's not what's coming through.
What are you looking at?
What you're telling us today is you want to trade the Hummer sign for the Land Rover sign that is shown in our deal. That may or may not be an acceptable trade to this commission. But what our application states before us is you want to go back to basically the old PUD and bump it up to a potential of another 1,130 feet. Now, as I look at the Land Rover sign that you have given us, it doesn't appear to be 500 square feet. It doesn't appear to be 47 feet tall. But yet that's what my application is saying. So, as the chairman suggested and as Commissioner Hensley suggested, if you can get back with staff, define exactly what you want, it would sure be helpful, because what I'm seeing here just will not work.
What does
The last paragraph under B states something different than what you've said.
Under B.
On the first page.
That's 147-foot 500 square feet.
It's clear that this is not going to be approved. It's clear this will not be approved today the way it is in front of us. So we're trying to help you here by suggesting that you get with the staff and that it come back to us as you really want to make the request. And then we will consider it. It's not going to go today.
I understand, but let me just clarify this. For your staff in the zoning department, I was told to shoot for the moon and fall amongst the stars is what I did. And I'm running out of time on filing this.
Sorry for that suggestion, but that isn't going to happen. The other thing I'll say for the benefit of the commission and for you, the franchise agreement, as it might call for a sign, does not dictate what we do in the city. So you need to understand that we have the ability to say signs are going to be 4 feet tall, 8 feet tall, 20 feet tall, whatever a city ordinance provides or whatever a PUD or an SPUD provides. So we are not compelled to take a sign as called for in a franchise agreement, just so that that's clear. I want to make that point for the commissioners, too.
I understand that.
I know you do, but
I was requesting this.
I heard some suggestion that maybe there was some confusion here on the horseshoe. Take a 2-week continuance and come back if you want approval. You have a choice.
What do I need to do now?
I think I've told you twice what you need to do.
Okay. Where do I get a continuance?
I'll take a motion for a 2-week continuance, or unless somebody wants to modify that suggestion.
I'll move that we continue this item for 2 weeks, give him a chance to clarify his application.
Second.
That means talk to J.J. Chambliss and get his guidance. He's sitting right there to your left.
I understand that. What would you all approve? Because that's what I'm going to ask for.
Well, that's not. You need to make the application. We're not writing it for you. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve continuance of item 14 for 2 weeks, and that's approved.
Item 15 is SPUD 558, an application by Health LLC to rezone 3337 West Hefner Road from R4, to SPUD 558.
Randy Hill with E.D. Hill, Surveying and Engineering, representing the applicant, the Lighthouse.
And Randy, or the applicant, has come back and done what we asked for a couple of weeks ago, and no one has signed up? You have it?
They've come back and changed the underlying zoning. I'm still concerned with the size of the snow cone stand. The existing snow cone stand is about 130 square feet, give or take. This is asking for 600. I've talked with the applicant, and I believe now, Randy, you're willing to drop that 600 to 200?
We'd be willing to do that, Tim.
With that modification, Mr. Chairman, I think this application will be all right.
Well, I apologize. I thought that the stand was 600 square feet. That I was just confused from the last hearing then, I guess.
No.
Okay. Oh, well.
It's a 20 by 30 foot building.
I just didn't.
It's a lot of ice.
I just didn't try and do the math. Okay, do we
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 15, limiting the restaurant use to 200 square feet. Cast your votes, and you're approved.
Thank you very much.
Item 16 has been continued until May the 27th. Item 17 is PC 10252, an application by Cottonwood Development to rezone land north of Memorial and west of Council from AA Agricultural to R1 Single Family.
Good afternoon. Kendall Dillon with Craft and Toll Sparks, representing the applicant. And this is an application, obviously, to permit a single-family residential subdivision that obviously you'll see in the next application. If you look at this piece of property, as the staff report suggests, it's in an area that has a continuing lot of residential development going on in this area. If you look at the zoning currently in place, we have this turnpike to the south, and then immediately south of the turnpike is a PUD that has some commercial stuff as well as residential there. We're surrounded on the east and the west by, on the west by AA, on the east by AA and a church, and then obviously on the north we're surrounded, or we're adjacent to R1 single-family zoning, which is the Stone Manor addition. We feel like this site's in compliance with your plan, and would ask for approval as well. Like I say, your staff recommended approval, and we'd ask for the same.
Kendall, when we talked before, my concern about this application is we're looking at a 50-acre site, straight R1 zoning, with a companion, pretty much cookie-cutter preliminary plat coming right behind it. It seems to me it'd be more appropriate in a PUD and put some design considerations in it. Try to keep with the character of what's to the north of it.
I want to add to that comment. Kendall, you've been involved in the appearance committee meetings with the work that the staff is trying to do to make subdivisions better. And on this one, while this isn't part of, but it's the companion application, the design that you're creating here is quite dense for the area, which I object to. But you've got 4 big, long cul-de-sacs that just, there's, the lead standards that Randy has suggested. The way that this thing is laid out, the connectivity, everything smacks of, let's just stamp this because we can do this within a square. And I think that the work, there's been no revision in the subdivision regulations adopted because we're still working on that committee, that this is exactly what it is that we've been talking about: long cul-de-sacs, no connectivity, density for the area, etc. And I think that this really does need to be kind of rethought just because of where it is, what's surrounding it. You've got AA on what? I don't know what that one is, but AA on all sides, and then Stone Manor has big, large lots, and you're squeezing in lots and lots of little small lots with cul-de-sacs, and I just really don't think that this is something that's appropriate, although probably under the current subdivision regulations, it probably is, except for the compatibility with the area, the density, et cetera. And that's really, I'll just add to what Nick is saying.
Well, in the subregs, certainly, they apply to the plat. We're on the zoning side, and I would just make you mentioned the compatibility side. I would differentiate this case with a case that also before us, the Ironstone.
I would too.
Ironstone being, that zoning is already in place. Here they are asking for that, for that zoning. And that's what I'm objecting to. I don't think straight R1 zoning may be appropriate here. I think if they want to come back with an R1 PUD with some design standards in it, it would be more appropriate.
I think too.
Any other commissioners' comments, Mike or Janice or Buck? Jane?
Yeah. Well, I was just going to, and understanding and respect to the PUD consideration, and I've kind of been guided the sense that there's some contractual deadlines, so backing up may not be an opportunity or a choice at this point. A little bit in regards to why we didn't come in with the PUD probably to start with is for a few reasons. Number one, we just looked at the site and said, hey, what use would go here? Obviously, if you look at what's going on, I think that single-family residential is probably a use that you guys would prefer to see, at least I would think, in regards to this location, the access, and those sort of things. Secondly, we looked at it and thought that, if you look at the adjacent properties, we've got 100 and a little over 110 acres of straight R1 zoning immediately to the north of us. North of that's 225 acres of straight R1 zoning. And then a half a mile to the east is another 140 acres of straight R1 zoning. As well as if you look at south of the Turnpike, a lot of R1, straight R1 zoning there. Do have some PUDs, but most of those, I think, is because of the commercial and some of the multifamily uses that are attached to it. So that combined with the fact that obviously we did not, or are not asking for any variances with our application, we're adhering to all of your subdivision regulations, all of your zoning ordinances. That's the reason that we come in with the straight zoning application, thinking that it was in compliance with, once again, your plan. Not to skip issues, but to go ahead and address, if you want to, the density and some of those things of what we've done. Granted, we do have some straight streets. We've got, but if you look at the design concept, what we've done is we're coming off of Memorial Road and we're coming in with a collector street. And although it doesn't appear on this exhibit, you'll notice on the actual preliminary plat that we have two medians, dividing medians to come in. That street we put on a curve. We put those landscape medians in there to kind of help break that up. We don't want, except for the 4 lots that are on the west when you immediately come in, we don't want any access onto that collector street. So that when you come in and you traverse throughout the subdivision, there's no driveways, there's no houses or anything, and we want to have it heavily landscaped so that you have a nice entry. You'll notice that we're giving up 6 acres of common area there, which is a large pond. So we want it, as you come into the subdivision, you're immediately looking down and you see a large pond, lots of landscaping. We're going to obviously adhere to your subdivision regulations in regards to the common area, both total common area as well as recreational. We're agreeing to do a walking trail down there. We're agreeing to do a playground equipment. We're agreeing to do gazebo, park benches, that type of thing. In regards to the length of the cul-de-sacs, if you'll look, really the cul-de-sacs, we've got 3 or 4 cul-de-sacs. If you look on the east, those are about 450 feet, which even under what's going to be your new subdivision regulations, if we amend it as per our study sessions, right, it's hard on that plan to tell the scale. So that's the reason I'm just pointing out that they're not very long cul-de-sacs, actually. The one that's middle ways up on, it's closer to probably 650 feet or so. It's a little bit longer. But nonetheless, we still have short cul-de-sacs. So we even think that kind of where we're headed overall. Now, when we talk about densities, once again, if you look at your plan, which is included in our staff report, your plan recommends mixed densities throughout different regions and different areas. when we look at this, we think this is, and as well as a mixed and a variety of different types of houses. When we look at this, we seem to think that this is a market, that this is something that's kind of missing in this area, and that we think it'll be successful. Thus, that's what we've come to you before, or with this particular plat. And then as well as the subdivision to the north, understanding that those are larger lots, but looking at it on a plan, we back up to 8 lots in their subdivision. Now, granted, we're tying onto a street connection, but that's part of your regulations as well. But we're impacting 8 lots. We've adhered to your subdivision regulations in regards to our lots that abut those. We've met your regulations there as well. So we don't think that, and two, once again, going back to our density and looking at in regards to providing certain densities in this style of house, you know, if we are going to do this type of density in this area out here, to me this is a pretty good location. If you look at Memorial Road, obviously it dead ends there, just to the west of our frontage. There's a huge drain immediately back over to the west that I think provides a big buffer between what's going to happen west of that drain and there. Obviously, I've described some of the things that we're taking into consideration on the north. And then if you look over back to the east, what you have, you got a church. You got one skinny parcel that's a residence that abuts on the council, and then we have oil wells and a tower, and some area, like I say, some, and even as opposed to even leases, the oil companies actually own those properties over there. So to me, if you look at this region and say, hey, this is a good product for this area, I think this is a pretty good location to put it. That's kind of our thoughts, and we'll proceed from there.
What sort of houses are we looking at you constructing in there?
As far as the construction, as far as square footage, I don't know exactly the answer to that. The lots themselves are a minimum of 6,600 square feet. So they're 600 square feet above what your code requires. I can tell you that verbally, obviously there's no commitment in preliminary plat street zoning, but I am told that there'll be 70% masonry and above. But once again, on the square footage, you know, I would have to think, and this is a guess, but, you know, I don't know if you're in the 16 up, could be 1,800 and up. I mean, you can fit a 2,000 square foot house on those. But that's starting to bump it, so I would figure you're in that neighborhood somewhere.
Nick?
Well, Kendall, I heard what you said. I also heard you reiterate all the other straight R1 zoning that's already in the area. I just don't think we need any more straight R1 zoning right there. I'd move denial of the application on 17.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second on item 17 for denial. Is there any further discussion?
Before we go, Mr. Chairman, I made that motion, Kendall, based on what I believe I understood you to say, that you want this to move forward, that you don't want to continue it and come back with anything else.
Correct. Unfortunately, I'm in a situation where I've been directed that...
No, I understand, and that's why I made the motion
sure.
that I did. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion second. Ready to vote? Cast your votes. It is denied, 5-2.
Item 18 is the preliminary plat for the same project, C6212.
Which is, do we act on that? We didn't approve the zoning.
Just continue it, yeah. Well...
6 weeks?
Yeah, let's go 6 weeks.
Which would be our second June meeting? June 24th, I guess, somewhere there. Okay, I have a motion second to continue this to the second June meeting, number 18. Cast your votes. And it's continued. Thank you.
Item 19 is C6208, the preliminary plat of Ironstone, south of Northwest 164th Street and east of Portland Avenue in Ward 8.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Mark Ritchie. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. Following meetings with Dennis Clowers and your staff earlier this week, we're pleased to say that we can concur with all of the TEs as amended, and we respectfully request your approval.
Mr. Ritchie, my comment would be that the TEs and the changes that were made don't address the concerns that I raised in the last meeting when we heard this case, which has to do with the fact that I think the application is premature. I don't think the infrastructure surrounding the area is adequate to service what you're proposing to do. I think it would have a negative effect on the quality of life of the people that you would sell these lots to and who would build homes there, and I think the same would be true of the people who are already in the area. I don't think this area is ready for more housing.
Mr. Chairman, I would echo what you said. I do appreciate the changes that were made, that were suggested in previous TEs and in these TEs, and it makes sense from a design standpoint to get the road out to the west and all that. But the primary concern why this was denied before was because of what you just said, Mr. Chairman, the density as it relates to infrastructure. And the only change I see here, Mark, is you've dropped about 10 lots. So really, in my mind, nothing, you've tweaked the changes, the design changes we suggested, but nothing from a big picture standpoint has changed, in my view, and I think we're right where we were when we saw this application before. I think it's premature. I don't see why there could be a different finding than what we found before.
Commissioners, any sentiments different?
Any protests?
There is, but Mr. Fudge is here to protest, but if we're going to deny the application again, he may want to save his thoughts.
I move to deny.
Second. We have a motion and a second.
Before you vote, briefly discuss a few issues.
Do they relate to the issues that we've just raised, which has to do with infrastructure?
They do.
All right.
Just briefly, I don't know that all the planning commissioners were privy to the technical evaluation amendments, so we probably need to read those into the record real quick. It's TE2. The developer should be required to construct a westbound left turn lane on Northwest 164th and Ironstone Drive with the second final plat. In TE3, we just need to add some language to make it clear about the signal warrant, when and how that's to be decided. The Planning Commission should require a revised traffic impact study and signal warrant analysis in conjunction with the submittal of the third final plat or in conjunction with the development of multifamily or office and commercial property adjacent to the west, if taking access from Iron Boulevard, with the signal warrant analysis to determine whether the traffic signal is necessary along 164th Street for either the easternmost or westernmost access into the preliminary plat. Traffic Management Division recommends that the design and construction be borne by the applicant. Any traffic signal location will be subject to the review and approval of the Traffic and Transportation Commission.
Okay, thanks.
If you don't have any questions about those, I would like to touch on a couple of issues. We met with Dennis Clowers, Terry, and Stewart both on Monday. I think it was Monday or Tuesday. Anyway, the main reason we met with staff was to discuss the two traffic issues, TEs 2 and 3, that the amendments were just read. We wanted to discuss with Dennis how those two features played into the impending reconstruction of Northwest 164th, which also plays a part. I had a conversation with Mr. Fudge before the meeting. He was unaware of it, and I'm under the assumption that many of the protesters were probably also unaware, despite the fact that 164th was approved under the 2007 bond issue. The traffic engineer that we hired to do our analysis actually submitted to an RFP that the Public Works Department put out to select an engineering firm to perform the engineering for 164th. I think there's a misunderstanding generally about the impending redevelopment of the infrastructure. 164th will be rebuilt in a number of years. Laura Story and Dennis Clowers confirmed that 2014 is likely for 164th.
You're making my point, which is
But what we're asking for is not permission to go build this entire development tomorrow, which we all agree would place even additional loading on an inadequate street out there. What we're asking for is to approve the preliminary plat, and then we would begin phase one, and it would take us 3 months to even prepare the phase one. I have the plat ready, but the construction plans, and then you're talking about 6 to 9 months worth of construction just to get the infrastructure in for phase one, which is only 130 lots. By then you're halfway or close to when 164th will be under engineering and getting ready for construction. That's why we conceded to do the westbound left turn lane as a part of phase two if 164th still hasn't been rebuilt, and why we agreed with Dennis Clowers to redo a traffic study and agreed that a traffic signal would be needed as a part of phase three. So we're trying to approach this in a phased development in line with the new infrastructure going in place.
I understand that. What I'm concerned about, and frankly in some ways frustrated with, and it isn't frustration with you, but it's the history of the way we have developed infrastructure in Oklahoma City, which is we go out and build and develop, and then years later we come along and realize we've created a problem, and now we have to go find a solution. Finding those solutions after the fact, when you have to begin to do reconstruction and move utilities and so forth, becomes a big... Let me finish, please. Becomes a trial for everybody, including the folks who are new to the area as well as those who have been there a long time. I'm witnessing all the reconstruction and widening of all of the streets in the north part of Ward 8 now, and it's a hardship on everybody who's already there. And we're adding to that, and I think unnecessarily. We're not saying that what you're proposing to do ultimately is not an appropriate use and compatible with the zoning that exists. But my point is the timing is wrong. Let's improve 164th Street. Then let's add to the development of the area when the infrastructure is in place to accommodate it.
And let me add, too, that I appreciate your analysis, but also I appreciate the Chairman's comment is that you're proving our point. In 2014, theoretically, that street's going to be widened. But 2014, in my mind, is that street is commenced to be widened with bulldozers and trucks and cement, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. This application is premature, and I stand on my motion to deny it.
Mr. Fudge, I don't want to preclude you from having something to say. Is there something you'd like to add to what we have said, or are you satisfied with our thoughts? Okay. So we have a motion and a second?
I would ask that the Commission consider a continuance so that we could look at possibly phased construction somehow that conforms to 164th reconstruction, or even possibly an approval.
He's making a request.
Or even a possible approval contingent upon the timing of 164th reconstruction. Something where we've spent all the time and effort, both staff and ourselves and yourselves, getting it to this point. Maybe go ahead and approve it and make it contingent upon waiting for 164th to be built.
I think I would entertain your motion for a continuance.
Okay.
I think
we can
that's
discuss it
agreeable.
further with staff.
I don't know what the result of that continuance might be, but I'd certainly consider
Continued
that.
indefinitely?
Well, let's consider that for a minute. That's
I'm sympathetic to what you're saying there, but in the same vein, I don't want to see this same application. And again, I'll say, I think you've made some good improvement from what we originally saw. But I don't want to see this same thing again in every 6 months, for example, just rolling around. I don't think we would be saying what we are about the infrastructure and being premature and those type of things if we were thinking short term, right. 6 months or something like that. So while I'm not unsympathetic to the continuance, I don't know what to say other than we could do an indefinite continuance to keep it alive, but gosh, don't bring it back every 6 months.
Because 164th won't be built then, I understand.
Yeah, we're not looking for phasing here before 164 is improved. In other words, that
I think I think we need to be careful there, because I think that's a difficult message in some aspects. Because is 10 houses the right number? Is 20? I think we all agree, fully built as it exists right now, that's too dense, too much, too soon. But I think we have a developer that's made a commitment to a piece of land out there that we think is premature for the manner in which it's to be developed. But I think we need to be at least willing to listen to a plan. And I think that's what everybody's saying here.
Well, but my concern is, Mike, we come back in 6 months, or we come back next planning commission. Right. My plan is to build the entrance and the first 5 houses. I'll be back next planning commission for the next 5.
No, I agree, Nick. I don't want to hear it every week.
And that's a ridiculous
I think Mark's
example,
got better things to do.
I understand, but I don't want to start that ball rolling.
I understand.
And that's the concern.
And this stretch is already overtaxed is the problem, and the neighbors already have problems getting in and out of their homes and to and from work, particularly at peak times of day. I know the area. And if we're adding to it now, if you add, it wouldn't make any sense to phase less than, say, 50 or 100 homes here as a start. From the developer standpoint. But that's going to just exacerbate a situation which is already a bad situation performing at level F.
Commissioner Yokel,
we'll continue until they widen the street.
That's
Commissioner Yokel, if I could, Mr. Fudge and I discussed this very thing. We all agree the roads are overloaded currently. I hear what the commission is saying, no more. Correct? The current conditions, even the current conditions when the traffic study was done and we lay the hoses across the street and count cars, is a result of the very points you just mentioned. May is under construction. Penn is under construction. State Highway 74 is way undersized. Meridian doesn't exist a mile west. Some of those factors are going to change before 164th is reconstructed. May will open up. Penn will open back up to 5 lane. 150th will be 4 lane, or opened up. It already is. 164th, lots of things that the 2007 bond issue set into motion are already presently improving things. So to say to my owner, no, you can't until 164th is better, I think is short-sighted on what the improvements are already adding to the area. Once we get May and Penn up to their, we get traffic cones off of 164th and the intersection of Penn, it's going to be better. That intersection is a mess right now.
I know.
So that's going to be a number of weeks. And then less traffic is on 164th because people are able to go south on May to Memorial or something. So that's why I'm asking for a continuance, so that we can meet again with Public Works, planning, say, what's the timeline on these others opening up? Does that affect traffic? What then could be done for phased construction?
If it'd be okay with my fellow commissioners to cut to the chase, I'll withdraw my motion to deny and move to continue this item for 6 months from today.
Nick, before we have a second.
6 months.
Look, Nick, this application is not going away. We denied it 9-0 6 weeks ago. It's back. The developer needs to move forward with his property somehow, whether we like it, think it's premature or not, and we can just keep denying it, but it's not going to go away.
Well, but is it going to go away in 6 months, or is it?
I can't say that.
Going to wake up in 6 months and have a great revelation that this is all of a sudden the best thing since sliced bread. As you made the point, we unanimously denied it, and we did it for a reason. And I don't see that that reason is going to change in 6 months.
I'm just trying to get out of town. I'm going to withdraw the motion to continue, and I'll move to deny it because I feel exactly the way that Nick does. Let them come back.
Mr. Chairman.
I really do. I want to deny it and then come back in with another application.
But the application would be similar in technical nature, but it would address
I think that you're not
the
getting
sequencing with
the
staff
point.
and planning.
Janice has a comment. Let's hear from Janice. Use your microphone, please.
It is. I'm a little uncomfortable with this sort of piecemeal approach to addressing the very real problem that you're talking about. There are so many of these places all over, mostly northwest Oklahoma City, but not entirely, where infrastructure is simply not adequate to support additional development on a large and dense scale. But yet, there's zoning in place, and there is certainly the attitude among many that, all this will be sorted out by the marketplace. And I feel like, while I am very, and I think we all are, as evidenced by our last 9-0 vote, very, very sympathetic and supportive of the policy you're almost espousing, I think we need to adopt it as a policy if we're going to take that kind of a stand and not simply impose it here and there or now and then or even every time an individual application comes before us. I don't know whether we're all ready to go there. I don't know if there's the political will to go there. But I just feel like it's not fair somehow to an applicant like this one for them to go through this process. They've got property that's zoned. They're ready to develop it. They're spending time, effort, and money. They're going through the process. I mean, clearly they have been willing to do a lot of hoop jumping since we last saw this application. They're really trying hard to do what they think we want them to do, and they're being confronted with the fact that that's not exactly what we want them to do. What we really want them to do is live with the reality that there's just not the infrastructure to support more development. And I think we need to be a little bit more comprehensive in that statement rather than, as I say, to impose it on this application and then that application, but maybe not the other application. It's not quite, doesn't feel good to me. I worry a little bit about it appearing to be arbitrary.
Well, I take your point about zoning and the owner having certain property rights, but I also think that all of the other property owners in the area have property rights too and have a right to a certain quality of life, and if they're in a circumstance where the infrastructure is clearly not adequate at the moment, and of course we hope it will be, that we take them into consideration as well. It's not just this property owner who has some rights at play here. It's all of the other people who are already there and already dealing with the infrastructure as it exists.
I agree with all of that. I just think we'll not necessarily address the merits at this particular point, as this is. He's asked for a continuance for his application for however long. You tell me, Mark, how long you want.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Okay.
And the reason I ask for that is, with all respect to the commission, I'm not a traffic engineer, and I won't begin to try to tell you if 164th is at capacity, has capacity, may regain capacity. I know my limits, and I would respectfully ask that the commission also hear that we were requested to hire a traffic consultant that does specialize in that, and their recommendation is that no improvement is needed at the intersection of Ironstone Drive and 164th for the first phase. Further than that, your very own traffic engineer, Stuart Chai, concurred with that very statement. He did go one further by saying that his personal and professional opinion would be that we would do a westbound left turn lane so that the traffic going west wouldn't have to stop while somebody waited to turn south. And by saying that, he's saying that there's still enough capacity in 164th to at least allow our first phase. But yet we find ourselves here, untrained traffic engineer to planning commission, trying to say that we know better. And I personally don't. All I know is that we hired a traffic engineer for several thousands of dollars at the request of the city staff, and we got a recommendation. Your own traffic engineer read the report, made his own recommendations, and neither of them reflected that this subdivision should not occur under any circumstances until 164th is rebuilt. So please hear that with all respect intended. I honestly mean it respectfully. I am not trained to make that call.
And Mr. Fudge, you obviously want to now address us, so please do.
I'd echo.
Give us your name and address for the record, please.
Randall Fudge, 16316 Dustin Lane. I'd like to reiterate what's been said here in support of denying the application, but I'd also like to point out that I don't think the widening of 164th is truly relevant to this. Mr. Ritchie told me that the traffic impact study that was done prior to the previous hearing is still the latest one that's been done. And the staff report on the previous hearing indicated that even if 164th is widened to 4 lanes, that it would lead to a drop in the level of service on 164th from an A to a C, or even possibly a D, which is defined as approaching unstable. So depending on the widening of 164th of this addition, I just don't, I don't think that's the true issue here. I think he's trying to hang his peg on that, but I don't think it matters.
Just so I'm clear, is that based on fully developed? My question is this, is because I think perhaps we're somewhat misguided in our thought process, maybe perhaps I am, is that your point is that the 164th is not the panacea we perhaps think it is. In other words, when fully developed, this addition will cause a level of service degradation to a D. Is that, I just want to make sure I understand you, Randy.
Potentially. A D. And that's the way I'm reading the item 2C in the previous Planning Commission, or the staff report that is omitted in today's report with no explanation.
All right. So, okay, I think I get your point. So,
although nothing's changed, there's been no additional traffic impact study.
Right.
The stub streets that have been added to the west, it's indicated the report that they don't know what impact that has in today's report. So I have to conclude that nothing has changed.
If I could respond to Mr. Fudge's comments, he is correct that the March 11th staff report, Stuart Chai's comments did read that if the current traffic conditions were to remain the same, these additional trips, meaning over 4,125, fully developed. So if nothing changes and you allow me to build all 421, the level of service for 164th Street will decrease from A to C. C is still an acceptable level in engineering terms.
Right.
But after that, 4-lane widening and considering a 2% annual growth rate, then it decreases to a D. Further than that, the traffic impact study has constraints at the direction of your staff. The traffic impact study that resulted in this is not allowed to consider future improvements. It was not allowed to consider State Highway 74 being an extension of the Hefner Parkway, some 65, 70 miles an hour with very little stop control. It was not allowed to consider that Penn and May were now 4-lane with center turn lanes, stoplight controlled intersections. So, yes, Mr. Fudge is correct that we get down to a C if you let me build every house out there right now with a 2-lane, but C is still acceptable, and 74 is going to happen. And Penn and May are already happening. And 164th and 150th are happening. I have friends that are engineers that are working on the design. So to flat deny it, I ask you not to do that. Please continue us for 2 weeks so that we and your own staff can work together to come up with a timing and a sequencing, or to even convince you that under the current conditions with 2 accesses, and we've agreed to do a westbound turn lane, like your staff even requested, we're still at a level of service of A with Phase 1 and Phase 2, and then when we get to Phase 3, level C. But by then, the road's been 4-laned, May and Penn are open, 150th, 164th are open, and likely 74 is under construction. Because we're talking 4 or 5 years from now by the time we get to Phase 3. We're not asking to build 421 homes today. We're asking for contingent approval of the preliminary plat with some sequencing that makes sense to match the infrastructure.
I'll move continuous for 2 weeks.
Go ahead, Nick. I'll hear it again in 2 weeks.
All right.
But we are setting ourselves up here. We heard this application, essentially this same application. They've tweaked it. They've made it better, in my opinion. We heard it and denied it. It turned around and came back. Pretty much unchanged. Tweaked, but unchanged. Now we say, well, okay, continue it, come back and tell us how you're going to build it out in pieces. That's really... Are we going to do this on all applications now?
Commissioner Gills, I beg to differ on the changes because we have satisfied every single technical evaluation by your staff and by the commission at our last hearing. At our last hearing, my understanding was that we were denied because we refused to do the southwest connection to the collector. And after going back and looking at that, it made a lot of sense for us to have that connection because it makes our commercial property out west more valuable to end users, big stores that want to have 421.
Thought that when we tried to suggest that to you during that hearing. And, that was there were numerous things that went into that motion for denial. I'm not saying it's all one thing, but the big thing is the infrastructure thing. And, again, I'll hear it again in 2 weeks, but I don't know what's going to change in 2 weeks.
Let me ask the applicant one question.
Yes, sir.
Are you going to consider changing the density?
No. We were approved for, I hate to kill you with exhibits, but in good faith,
Well, I guess the question is, just before we go back to the merits, is this determinative of your vote on the motion for continuance, James?
I believe Mr. Budge has something to say.
If I may. According to the minutes of the last hearing, it was denied due to potential traffic impacts and incompatible density. Now, the staff report from March 11th read that they were proposing 423 single-family lots. Today's staff report indicates the developer is proposing 421 single-family lots. That's a difference of 2 lots, less than 0.5%.
I think you meant to say 10 lots.
No, I meant 2.
From 431 to 421?
That was your original proposal. The matter was continued from January to March, and you went down to 423 back in March, and today you're down 2 more. So to me, that's less than 0.5% from the denial, the unanimous denial of March 11th. So what's different other than some curves in the plat?
If you could briefly look at that exhibit I just passed out. December 11th, this very commission approved the PUD 1382 in the configuration that you see on those exhibits. Starting from the west, 30.2 acres of C3 to O2. Coming east, 20 acres of what was originally 30 units per acre, but at the request of Commissioner Gales, we reduced that to 28 units per acre of apartment land. Now, the subject track C, we negotiated with staff. We appeared before you. We met technical evaluations that were requested at that time and were approved for R1 for all of Tract C, 91.6692 acres at 5 units per acre. The current application before you only asks for 4.6 units per acre. That's 8% less than what we're allowed to by zoning. My clients feel they've made concessions there. We agreed to change the street configurations. to try to eliminate and minimize the raceway effect. Last one. Honest, promise. Last exhibit.
Thanks. Boy, we sure got a bunch of these.
Commissioner Irwin, you got shorted one. I think it's
coming your way.
Please just listen to me for 1 second. I'm an engineer. I was trained as an engineer. In 4th grade, if I had been assessed, people would probably told you I was an engineer. If you give me regulations, I think that's the rule book of how to do it. I hope I'm not the only civil engineer out here that looks at the current subdivision regulations and thinks, this is my design guide. Because both applications that we've brought you have been technically adequate to meet the subdivision regulations. But what you're seeing in the photo on there is the row of garage fronts that you pointed out to me as ugly, that I went and looked at additions and realized, wow, that is kind of a boxy way to live. And what we've come back to you with is a complete redesign. I don't know if you know what goes into assembling a preliminary plat, but we basically threw the other one out completely and came up with this. And it's a really good solution that eliminates the garage front lines, gets as much as a 10 to 13-foot offset for the center lot compared to the end lot, creates less of an eyesore, and more of a community feel. You're not living in a shoebox kind of deal. So please consider that we've addressed every single technical evaluation. We're permitted up to 5 units per acre. We're doing 8% less than that. I've got another exhibit, but I won't bore you with it. We're doing more than's required on common area. 3.2 is the rule book, the subdivision regs. Engineers think of it as a rule book. That's 3.2. By golly, what's my area? I'm going to do 3.2 of that as a park. But we're doing 3.5. You asked for recreational facilities. We've provided that as 130 square foot. What's 130 square foot of playground? Is that half a slide? Well, my developers have done 17 reputable developments in this community that exceed, and that's why they sell. That's why they are a leading developer in the community, because they go above and beyond the subdivision regulations. They do more playground equipment. They require more rock, stone, veneer. They have very restrictive covenants. If people put jalopies in their side yard, they get them out of there, not the HOA. My developers are very reputable developers. This will be an excellent development.
We're just for clarity, Mr. Ritchie, we're not criticizing your developer or impugning anybody's either work history, product, or integrity. We do have an OKC master plan that guides us as well as the subdivision regulations, and it tells us to take things into consideration like infrastructure support, compatibility, and a whole host of other considerations when we hear applications. So the subdivision regulations are a part of what we consider, and certainly you must meet them, but we're also directed to take into consideration other issues as well that affect the quality of life of everyone, not only the people who will prospectively live here, but all of the folks around there. So, I mean, we have to consider all of that. Mr. Rudge, you had something, I think. You look like you want to say something. If you don't, you don't have to.
I'd just say as far as the continuance, I mean, the last hearing we had was, it had been continued twice before, so.
Which, Mr. Fudge, I respectfully point out that that's not uncommon. As we work through the process with staff, numerous contingencies occur.
I think
No, when
density and its impact, I believe, is the central issue. They've told you they will not lower the density. I see no reason to do anything different since there's been no change from last time other than to deny the application.
My real concern, Mr. Fudge, isn't density per se, it's impact, and impact on the infrastructure. I mean, we have zoned this so that it could be developed someday as R1, so I'm not ever going to suggest that I have any business telling them what lot size, house size, or anything of that sort ought to go here. My only concern has been the impact on principally the surrounding road system.
Commissioner Yokel, with that in mind, would you agree to a continuance of 2 weeks so that we can allow the professionals to determine whether 164th is adequate now for some portion of the development?
I'll go along. Let me comment, and then, of course, Nick and James. I would go along with a continuance of some sort. 2 weeks is not enough, because if you're starting to talk about what effect 164th Street to the west will have as it's widened, May Avenue south to Memorial being widened, the impacts that you were talking about, 150th Street being four-laned and so forth, and you're obviously indicating to me that those all have some relationship to what could be happening here. I'd want to have some input on that, and I don't think you can do that in anything like 2 weeks. Nick, you have something?
Well, I agree you can't do it in 2 weeks, but the other point I would make is this discussion seems to have gotten down to 164th Street. I think there's much more involved than just 164th and its adequacy, whether it is adequate at its present 2-lane or when it's 4-lane or whatever. I share your concern, Mr. Chairman. Its impact. It's not necessarily density. Obviously, the two do somewhat go together. The more dense, the more impact you're going to have, certainly. I just don't know why this application is so unique that it commands the attention that it's getting. It was heard. It was denied. It's back. I admit it's back in an improved state, but it's immediately back.
Let's just vote on the continuance motion.
Okay.
If you don't want to vote for the continuance, don't vote for the continuance. We'll defeat it. We'll deny it. But let's move this.
Oh no, I've already said
I suggest we vote
the continuance
on the continuance.
Of the board.
And I'd like to go back to what John was saying. I think the time of the continuance, 2 weeks is a little short. I think 2 weeks is short.
We would be fine with a little bit longer. That we can understand, because we're going to have to talk to several people to understand the construction schedule of Penn and May and all that.
90 days.
If I could ask Commissioner Gills if you could point out some of the other issues, because I, too, was gathering from this that 164th is the hinge pin. So what are the other issues so that we can have those addressed and respectfully bring back a response to you on those?
I believe those were enumerated in about an hour of discussion last time, so I would suggest you just pull the tape and go through it.
TEs?
No, not the TEs, the hearing. We spent over an hour on this the last time,
Like density? Mark. Because the density's been approved at 5. I don't know.
We have a motion and a second to continue this, let's say 6 weeks at a minimum.
Fine with me.
Now, who made the motion? Who made the second?
I make the second.
Motion is Mike. All right. Let's vote on the motion. Cast your votes. We'll see you in 6 weeks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Item 20 is C-6214, a final plat of La Sonata, addition north of Northwest 192nd Street and west of North Pennsylvania and Ward 8.
Chris Anderson, SMC Engineering, representing the developer. Read the staff report. We agree with the TEs and just request approval of this final plat.
Commissioners, first of all, no one has signed up on any of the next three cases. In all three cases, the final plat closely follows the preliminary plat. In item 21, we'll have a variance to talk about, but
Yes, sir.
motion?
Move approval.
The motion is second to approve item 20. Cast your votes. It's approved.
Thank you.
On item 21, we do have a variance. It does otherwise conform to the preliminary plat, and the variance was just missed at the preliminary plat stage.
I move approval of, I move approval of the variance on TE number 3.
With a motion second to approve the variance TE3, cast your votes.
I move approval of the application.
With a motion second to approve item 21, cast your votes. That's approved.
Thank you.
Item 22, C-6316 is the final plat of La Sonata. Addition to Section 2.
Again, this closely follows or matches the preliminary plat, Commissioners.
Move approval of the application.
The motion is second to approve item 22. Cast your votes, and it's approved.
Thank you very much.
And that concludes the items for individual consideration, so we shall go to Planning Commission committees.
I was heartened today to see some improvement from response with respect to our garage front. Even in the controversial last application, there was some addressing of that particular issue, and so I've had conversations in the background with a couple of the engineers, and so hope to get some additional clarity on that upcoming. So, but baby steps. I felt a little better about that.
Good. Planning Commission members? Planning Department?
At the next meeting, we have both a study session and an Urban Development Committee meeting.
Topics?
The Urban Development Committee will be the signs, the EMD and the downtown sign. And study session will be very brief, and I've forgotten what the topic is, but it's sort of a... Huh? No, it's that. I put the emphasis on brief there. So.
Won't be on infrastructure, will it?
No.
Would that be, you're talking next meeting, the 27th?
Next meeting, 27th.
You'll be here? Okay.
One thing further, I know Commissioner Yokel knows about this, but they're scheduling a meeting with respect to the development planned at Northwest Expressway and Lyrewood Lane, Wilshire Boulevard, the OnQ. So if you have a bent to attend a neighbor meeting with a neighborhood regarding that particular piece of property, it'll be coming up June 3rd. I'll give you the details if you need it.
I think it's 6:30, is it not?
6:30, yes. At the Lansbrook Church there, directly across the street to the north of that
Old Church of the
property.
Servant.
Used to be behind the Valero station there. You know where I'm talking about.
And we did launch Plan OKC last week as well, and John was there. And you can expect to get involved here relatively shortly. We had about 120 people at that.
Yep.
And Susan's group are organizing quite a number of presentations and discussions with neighborhoods and other interested groups. So.
And municipal councilors? Citizens to be heard? Motion to adjourn. And we're adjourned.